Good afternoon, everyone. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Shaib Jama, aka Jet, and I am the Community Health and Wellness Coordinator at ETSS. Welcome to today's training on the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. This is the first training of its kind, and it's the first of its series. Today's training is the overview training, and we will be basically covering all 5 of the communities. You will be hearing more about it shortly. This This training focuses on behavioral health emergency preparedness and the response for Ohio's resettled communities. So in 2024, ETSS did a study called Culturally and Linguistically Appropriate Emergency Preparedness and Crisis Response for Ohio's Resettled Communities. We did this study basically to gauge emergency preparedness, behavioral health preparedness in vulnerable communities, looking at 5 resettled communities in Ohio: the Afghan community, Bhutanese, Nepali, Congolese, Ethiopian, Eritrean, and Somali community. So before we get started, let's go ahead and go over some group agreements, and our moderator will also be dropping these in the chat on YouTube's and pinning them on there so that we can all be on the same page. So the first one is AI note takers are not allowed in state meetings or trainings. This session is being recorded and will be made publicly available through the Ohio Moss YouTube page and the E-Based Academy. Please keep your microphones muted unless you're speaking to minimize background noise. Feel free to use the chat for questions or comments throughout the webinar. Always remember to be respectful to all. And then we'll have some time for the questions at the end, but you can drop questions in the chat box anytime. And there's also an email that the moderator on YouTube will be also pinning that you can send all your questions to. So I want to acknowledge Ohio Moss, which basically funded this study, the previous study, and also what we're doing today, how we're able to host these trainings. We have 2 representatives from Ohio Moss. We have Liz Poprocki, the Behavioral Health Treatment Coordinator, and we have Dr. Surendra Adurkari, which is the Administrator and Disparity Research Lead. I also want to recognize Suzanne Schaefer, which is the Director of Economic Stability at ETSS, and Amy Harkar, which is the Director of Community Health and Wellness, Health and Safety at ETSS, for their project leadership and dedication. I also want to give big thanks and round of applause to the ETSS Community Health and Wellness team for their ongoing contribution and support. I also want to give a shout out to Israel, which helped us a lot in the previous grant, and also Ernuai, which is going to be helping with some of the manuscripts for this project. I also want to acknowledge the community-based organization leaders and the communities. So for the Afghan community, we worked with Immigrants Integration Station, Mr. Ali, and his contact information is right there. For the Bhutanese Nepali community, we worked with Vedic Welfare Society, and his contact is there. For the Congolese community, we worked with the Congolese community of Columbus, Ohio, and their contact is there. And then for the Ethiopian Eritrean community, we worked with Beta Yared, and his contact is there. He's a church father. And then for the Somali community, we worked with Forward Step Education, and their contact is also provided. So let's go over the webinar outline. So we will go over the introduction, so the importance and gaps, and then we're going to go over some key findings from the quantitative survey. Then we'll go over some key findings from the qualitative focus group, youth focus group. Then we will go over some information dissemination, emergency kits, and community contacts. We'll go over some best practices and recommendations, and then we'll go over some resource walkthroughs, so what ETSS has to offer. And then at the end, we will do a conclusion and Q&A. I will now pass it on to Dr. Saleshi to share with us why this study matters. So if we can have Dr. Saleshi on the stage.
All right. Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Saleshi Seleshi Asfaw. I'm the founding member and CEO for Ethiopian Tohado Social Services, known as ETSS Tawahido. I would like to begin by really welcoming you all and thank you for our partners, especially Ohio Mass, my dear friend Dr. Adikari, and then Liz and Dr. Vicky for making this partnership happen, and also from our friends from Ohio, Miami University, Dr. Gimari and Aisha for your professional work and really amazing, amazing work that you put together this emergency preparedness project. And also my team, Jet, you did a wonderful job in coordinating and leading. Also, Suzanne Schaffer for the the guiding this, and Amy Herker and Denise and everyone there that participating on this project. I really thank you all for everything that you did, and especially my great thank you to our ethnic and faith-based grassroots organization leaders. Members and leaders from the Ethiopian Eritrean community, from the Somali community, from Afghan Congolese, and and Bhutanese Nepali community. So it's an amazing project because emergency preparedness is so important. But just to give you about ETSS, ETSS Tawahido is one of the largest and prominent refugee migrant serving organizations here in Central Ohio, um, helping refugee and immigrants integrate into Central Ohio. It started in 2000 to reach out the Ethiopian community, and then in 2005 we expanded our mission and vision to embrace all other new Americans and also low-income individuals in Central Ohio. So our main vision and mission is really centered around societal integration because there are so many barriers and challenges that the refugee immigrant communities are suffering. We work on 6 integration projects: the economic integration, language and cultural integration, social integration, which is education and health and wellness, psychosocial integration, political integration, system integration. These are the areas that we are really focusing on to our community. So disaster do not discriminate, but systems often do. And that's what we really want to have. A fair disaster preparedness is not just an important, but it is very essential. So why we are participating on this project and for this emergency preparedness grant is that, number one, when we took on the emergency preparedness grant, we were not responding to a hypothetical risk, but wanted to really a community-based, community engaged services, evidence based programs and interventions that we are looking for. And you can see, I mean, most non-profit organizations, they think and they said that they know the issue of the community, but we are wrong. It is the community who has to be really engaged and participate and become belong to the project. That's what, we're jumping in on this project. Second is, we saw the first hand that our communities were often the last to receive information, the last to get resources, and the first to suffer the consequences of a crisis, whether it was a power outage, a flood, a public health emergency, or civic unrest. Our new Americans are because of lack of information, because they don't understand the system. We have seen this on COVID-19 time crisis. I mean, we really have a large, very difficult that to reach out and convince people to take vaccines and mobilizing and coordinating resources. It's just after some families has been, died before COVID. So important and crucial. Why ETSS take this be part on this group is, number one, we are already speaks the language and understand the cultures of the people most likely to be overlooked in the disaster response plans. Second, have a trusted relationship with immigrant and refugee families across Franklin County and across Ohio. We are designated service providers by the state for the 7 contiguous county, and now practically we are Ohio statewide agency that we are serving refugee immigrants and other low-income individuals. We are deeply embedded in community systems, including schools, clinics, housing development, and neighborhood centers. We did not just have a plan, we have the infrastructure, we have the relationships and credibility to execute it equally and fairly. So, what this grant enables us to do, or this partnership together with you, is that with the support that we got, we educate our community members on how to prepare their families for emergencies, distribute multilingual emergency kits and materials. Third, coordinated with our ethnic and faith based organizations or leaders to distribute surveys on emergency preparedness, relied on internal programs such as the Youth Employment Program, Reach High, and Health Transition Program to learn youth perspective on emergency preparedness, because the youth are really the translators that open the doors for their families, read everything that comes, because they are better than the language. So engaging youth in this emergency planning or preparedness is very, very smart and crucial. And a lot of things that we are going to do with this. This was not just a program, it was a lifeline, one that gave people hope, dignity, and a sense of safety. So, why we are confident and committed moving forward, when disaster strikes, our families need more than number to call. They need a neighbor they trust. They have to engage. They have to participate. They need a resource they understand and plan that includes them. ETSS is a bridge with comprehensive culturally and linguistically appropriate services, which is called we call class, and that's why, because we are bridging, we are providing different services. So this community based engagement, like, look, now this is a model program that we build in, this is a model project, because the state agency, the university, community-based organization like ETSS, and ethnic and faith-based organizations, this is a true community project. That's why, ETSS is facilitating and leading and championing on this, not on the health and wellness, on behavioral health alone, but in other projects on education, on workforce development, in everywhere we are building this kind of community-based and grassroots approach, which is really a true partnership. So, in closing, a call to action that I would like to recommend is to provide fair disaster preparedness is not optional; it is foundational. It holds our health, our safety, and our futures. This work is racial justice, is economic fairness. We are proud to lead with community and class at the center, to talk to policymakers and funders and partners. The invitation is open. Work with us, build with us. I thank you for your time and your dedication to learning more about how to better serve this community. So I really, really appreciate our partners. This, I hope, will be transferred to other areas of social determinants of health. And then better, together we can build our community together. Thank you so much.
Lashif, thank you so much for that important talk, Dr. Salashi. And then now we will go ahead, and before we hear from Liz, I will go and let me just pull it up real quick. So I will go over the study objectives in further details. So if we could have that slide up with the study objectives. And thank you, Dr. Saleshi. He briefly covered some of them, what ETSS did, but I will briefly be going over in more depth what each one of these entailed. Thank you. So the study objectives was 1, to assess communities' awareness of emergency preparedness practices, 2, to identify barriers in accessing emergency services, 3 was to evaluate the cultural and linguistic appropriateness of existing preparedness resources. And then we did all those 3 by doing a survey. So when Dr. Saleshi was speaking, you briefly heard that ETSS, partnered with local community organizations to distribute a survey. And that's how we collected these three objectives. For the fourth objective, it was to explore youth perspectives on community engagement in emergency planning. For that, we had the youth focus group, which had a lot of good things that we learned from it. And then five was to disseminate multilingual preparedness content via social media. Our community health and wellness team created social media posts in multiple languages, and we posted it on our ETSS pages. And we will also be showing some of those social medias today. Number six was to establish a collaborative referral platform linking communities to behavioral health professionals, Adam H boards, and public health agencies. I just wanted to make sure the mic was on still. Okay, perfect. So that last one, we basically partnered with the same community-based organizations. We asked them to collect a list of community members in their community, and we will be sharing some of that list, but not the full list today. And we'll be sharing how to get access to the full list. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it on to Liz from Ohio Moss to go over the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the importance of these current webinars, and to share the dates for the remaining trainings. Take it away, Liz.
Thank you so much, Jet. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Liz Poprocki, Behavioral Health Treatment Coordinator with the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. I'm here with my project co-lead, Dr. Surendra Bir Adhikari, our health disparity research lead at Ohio Moss. First, we would like to take this moment to thank Dr. Saleshi, Jet, and the entire ETSS team, Dr. Saruna and her team, for this incredible partnership and all the work that they have done to make this webinar a success. Thank you to all of the professionals who took time out of your day to share this space with us. This work could not be done without you. Let's dive in. A community's resilience to traumatic events depends on a community's response. A community's response depends on its preparedness. Ohio has been fortunate that existing community provider systems and volunteer agencies often collaborate to assist Ohioans during disasters. However, continued development and integration of behavioral health within these partnerships is an essential component to assuring Ohio's readiness to address all Ohioans' immediate and long-term behavioral health needs in the aftermath of a disaster. In 2023, Ohio Moss was awarded a Bipartisan Safer Communities Act grant. You all may know it as BSCA. This is from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA. This grant supports state behavioral health systems like Ohio Moss in examining what is needed to address the mental health needs in the aftermath of a traumatic event and/or disaster within our communities. This funding was and is currently being used to strengthen and enhance behavioral health disaster preparedness and crisis response efforts. The BSCA grant provides a unique opportunity to develop improved and sustainable public behavioral health systems that are more adept at meeting the needs of historically underserved people, including those with more complex presentations. In 2024, ETSS was awarded a grant through the BSCA grant and Ohio Moss. Under the leadership of Dr. Adhikari, this grant allowed ETSS to conduct research that examined disaster equity and accessibility in 5 of Ohio's resettled communities. This project sought to ensure the unique needs of Ohio's vulnerable immigrant and refugee communities are effectively being met during and after a traumatic event. The project ultimately developed collaborative behavioral health partner approaches for coordinated emergency and disaster response through the mobilization of culturally and linguistically competent, bilingual community mental health navigators, addressed crisis and mental health emergency and associated trauma, and developed culturally and linguistically tailored messaging about behavioral health issues to Ohio's resettled communities. Because of this report and the work that ETSS did, we now have a much clearer perspective and have gained knowledge as to what these communities and people need and want in terms of emergency disaster and crisis services. Its success is why we have awarded ETSS with a grant in fiscal year 2025 to continue to educate Ohio's emergency management and response personnel and behavioral health professionals on this critical information. As mentioned before, this webinar is the first of a series. The next ones are the Afghan community on July 1st, the Bhutanese Nepali community on July 8th, the Somali community on July 17th, the Ethiopian and/or Eritrean community on July 24th, and the Congolese community on August 8th. This webinar series will help close the gap in services to decrease cultural misunderstandings, expand your knowledge of culturally appropriate approaches, and strengthen overall resilience during crises. And with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Saruna.
Okay, let's get started. Thank you so much, Liz. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Saruna Ghimire, and I am Associate Professor at Miami University in Ohio. I was also one of the team member for the 2024 study that Jed shared at the beginning of this webinar. Um, and today I'll be sharing with you the quantitative findings from that study. Okay, so I am going to give you a very brief overview of what we did before diving into what we found. So we conducted a cross-sectional survey and we had 266 adults, 18 and older, living in Central Ohio. Participants represented 5 of the communities that we already pointed out before, and that includes Afghan, Bhutanese, Congolese, Ethiopian, Eritrean, and Somali communities. ETSs, in partnership with local community-based organizations and faith-based institutions that included churches and temples, led participant recruitment. To make the survey accessible, it was offered in 8 different languages. English was one of the primary languages, but we also offer in 7 different languages that was primarily spoken and understood by our participant. Respondents could choose to complete the survey online via Qualtrics, or if they felt more comfortable with a paper-based version, we were able to provide them paper copies, which was distributed through help of local leaders. Okay, so let's look at the demographic of our survey participant. In the next few slides, I will be giving you an overview of participants' age, gender, education, English proficiency, and disability status. So let's look at the demographics. And speaking about age, we had a broad range of age groups, but mostly our participants were relatively younger, with the majority between 26 and 45 years old. Overall, there was a slightly higher participation from women, which was also consistent across most communities that we surveyed. The only exception was the Bhutanese community, where there was a slightly higher representation of male. This gender distribution is particularly important to highlight because we know women often play key roles in family preparedness and caregiving during time of emergencies. I also wanted to point out a notable finding where we had a significant presence from Afghan women, and it was very praiseworthy because Afghan women are usually less represented in research. Okay, so now let's talk about how long they have been resettled in United States or Ohio and their English proficiency. So the length of time in Ohio varied, and overall, the majority of the participants have been in Ohio for over 5 years. When we look at different communities, Afghan are recently resettled, while the majority from other communities have lived here for over 5 years. When it comes to English proficiency, all the participants from the Ethiopian Eritrean community could read, write, and speak in English. Notably, a high proportion of participants from Afghan community reported limited or no English proficiency in terms of their ability to read, write, and speak in English. In terms of educational attainment, it also varied among the communities. Over half of the Congolese and Ethiopian Eritrean participants were college graduates. In contrast, a large proportion of Afghan and Somali respondents reported having no formal education or only completing or not even completing high school education. These differences in educational level, coupled with low English proficiency that we saw in previous slide, especially for the Afghan community, can really impact how these participants could access, understand, and also act on emergency preparedness information that is provided through different resources. Okay, so we will talk about disability in this slide because it was one of the important factors that we examined, because we know individuals with disability or having a family member with disability may encounter additional challenges during emergencies. And as you can see in these figures, about 1 in 10 participants identified as having disability themselves, and 15% reported caring for someone with a disability. In terms of between community differences, we can see the disability experience was much more common among the Bhutanese community. Okay, so now let's move to community experiences with disaster, their level of preparedness, and whether they have an emergency management plan in place. These insights will really help us to understand not just whether these communities have experienced disaster, but also how ready are they to respond in the future if one was to happen. So we asked participants if they had ever experienced a disaster while living in the US. And I just wanted to emphasize that these experiences are after resettlement in the US and not prior to resettlement. As we know, they have undergone so much before resettlement. So about 1 in 5 said yes, they have experienced a disaster. The Bhutanese community reported the highest number, where more than half of them said that they had gone through a disaster in the United States. The most common emergencies participant mentioned was obviously the COVID-19 pandemic, given it was a recent phenomenon we all went through. That was followed by house fires and power outage. There were also other type of disaster that participant reported, but those were uh, less frequently reported, as you can see in this chart here. Okay, so next we asked about disaster preparedness, whether people know about preparedness and what actions they have taken to prepare for that. More than a quarter of participants from the Afghan, Congolese, and Somali communities said they were not familiar with how to prepare for a disaster. Among those, which was a small proportion of participants who were aware, the most common things people knew about were making their homes safer, gathering or updating emergency supplies in the home, creating an emergency plan, and saving money in case of emergencies. Okay, so next we asked a participant how likely they thought a disaster might affect their area and how confident they were in responding to one if one did happen. Interestingly, close to 70% said they either thought a disaster was unlikely in their area or they were not really sure about if it would happen. When it comes to confidence in responding to a disaster, only 16% said they felt extremely confident, and the majority was not confident. Confidence was highest among Ethiopian, Eritrean, and Bhutanese participants. We also asked participants whether they had an emergency management plan in place, and overall, about 60% said they don't have one. The Bhutanese community was the exception, where about 60% of them did have a plan for disaster management. We then further asked participants what specific plans they had. Can we go back to the previous slide? Thank you. When we asked participants about, sorry about that. When we asked participants about the specific management plan that they had, only a small number of participants had taken key steps to prepare for disaster. And the most common thing participants had done included protecting important documents, gathering or updating emergency supplies, making their home safer, planning for financial emergencies, and getting insurance for their property. Now let's look at some of the barriers and challenges participants faced when trying to access emergency preparedness resources. Okay, as you can see in this slide, over 40% of the participants said that they had never accessed any emergency preparedness resources. Only 1 in 10 said they had faced difficulties doing so, and the Bhutanese participants were most likely to report challenges accessing emergency resources. We then asked participants if they know how to get help during an emergency, and about half of the participants said they did not know how to get help if there was an emergency. This was true for most of the communities except for the Bhutanese community. And this is interesting because the Bhutanese participant, although they reported facing the most difficulty accessing resources, they were also the group that was most likely to say that they knew how to get help during an emergency. Okay, so we then asked about specific barriers people faced when trying to access emergency services. The most common challenges was language, which was reported by 42% of our participants. Language barrier was found across all 5 communities. Other barriers also were mentioned, and that included cultural beliefs, religious practices, and experiences related to race. Next, we asked participants whether they felt the emergency preparedness materials were culturally appropriate. Most of them said that the materials were either very appropriate or somewhat appropriate. But a significant number of participants, about one third to be more precise, said the materials did not feel culturally appropriate. Congolese and Somali participants were most likely to report that the materials were not culturally appropriate. We then asked participants if they had received any emergency preparedness training in the past 3 years. Only about 18% said that they had taken part in such training. The Somali and Congolese communities had the highest participation, while the Bhutanese and Afghan participants were least likely to have received any such training. When we asked about barriers to attending training, the most common reason was lack of awareness that such training existed or time constraint from their regular chores. Notably for the Congolese community, lack of cultural fit was a major barrier. Uh, I'm still in the previous slide. Can we? Thank you. So for Congolese community, lack of cultural fit was a major barrier, and for both Afghan and Congolese participants, language was a significant challenge that prevented them from taking part in those training. Okay, so this slide is focused on communities' engagement in emergency preparedness, and we found that community discussion about emergency preparedness were very limited. Only about 1 in 4 participants said their communities had talked about emergency management, and the Bhutanese and Somali community were more likely to have had these kind of discussion than other communities. When we asked about the best ways to get communities engaged, participants pointed to a few key strategies, and that included hosting meetings at community centers, sharing information at religious gatherings, and using social media for dissemination, as well as partnering with local trusted community-based organizations to share efforts during emergency preparedness. These were seen as some of the most effective ways to reach and involve their communities in emergency preparedness effort. So finally, we asked participants about most effective tools for talking about emergency preparedness in their communities, which could help us to find out how we can reach them better. And text messages and phone calls were identified as most preferred methods, followed closely by emails, printed handouts, or flyers. Other tools such as websites and digital resources, lesson plans, activity books were also reported to be helpful. When it comes to improving preparedness overall, participants strongly supported a few key strategies, and those included community created materials in local languages. So they wanted materials in their languages created by through community collaboration, offering multilingual training and multilingual staff from local communities. So as we can see here, these responses highlight a clear path forward. Build preparedness effort from within the community. So really community engagement using tools and approaches that reflect their language, their culture, and their preferred ways of communication. So with this, I conclude the findings from our quantitative survey.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a relaxing break and thank you for joining us in today's webinar. Good afternoon. I'm Isha Karmacharya, a doctoral student at Miami University. I was also involved in the 2024 study. I had an excellent opportunity to work and intern for ETSS for this project, majorly contributing the qualitative part. Now I will be sharing the findings from the qualitative focus group discussion with youth. And this discussion was very insightful and important to know their perspectives on emergency crisis and preparedness. We held a 60-minute in-person focus group discussion with 10 participants aged 18 to 25, representing each of the 5 communities: Afghan, Bhutanese, Nepali, Congolese, Ethiopian, Eritrean, and Somali. Participants were recruited through the ETSS Youth Advisory Panel and were all fluent in English. The discussion was facilitated by trained moderators and focused on 4 main areas: public health concerns, awareness of emergency resources, barriers to preparedness, youth recommendations for community actions. Next slide, please. Several important themes emerged from the discussion. First theme was on public health emergencies and crisis concerns reported by youths. Second was awareness of resources for emergency preparedness. Third theme was about significant barriers or challenges for emergency preparedness. And fourth theme was youth sharing powerful recommendation for action to improve community preparedness. Next slide, please. Youth participants highlighted several critical public health challenges within their communities, such as substance use was seen as growing concern, especially among middle and high school students, since one participant said, "I think drug abuse is probably one of the biggest emergencies that I have seen in my community, especially among kids around my age, high school kids, and even like middle school kids." Bhutanese Nepali youth raised concern over increasing suicide rates in their community, while Somali youth emphasized the trauma caused by gun violence. Social isolation was another major concern, particularly for women and older adults with limited English skills. Youth noted that many of these crises go unrecognized or are accepted as normal, which prevents meaningful action. Next slide, please. Youth identified some resources that their community relied on during emergency situations, such as phones, Google search, and social media as their first go-to sources of information in a crisis. They also identified trusted community hubs such as mosques, temples, and Ethiopian Mahabar groups as key places for gathering and support and serve as informal crisis coordination points. Next slide, please. Many youth participants expressed frustration that even when services are available, those services are poorly advertised and hard to navigate, especially for older adults. For example, one participant mentioned there are definitely resources out there somewhere, but the issue is that finding out about them is so difficult because there are no marketing for them. Somali and Congolese youth um, Somali and Congolese youth in particular shared that emergency preparedness is hardly discussed by community leaders and the information isn't always accessible, indicating gaps in knowledge and awareness of emergency preparedness. They feel that more could be done to publicize available assistance through familiar and trusted channels like local leaders, WhatsApp group, and community centers. This gap between service availability and actual awareness highlights a major opportunity for better communication strategies. Next slide, please. Many youth participants, highlighted language as the most frequently cited barriers by um, uh, for the emergency preparedness. Um, they shared the older adults in their communities often cannot call 911 or understand safety instructions due to limited English proficiency. Participants brought up an example like during COVID-19 pandemic. This language gap created confusion and fear, with many community members unable to understand public health messaging and had a really difficult time grasping the information. Youth emphasized the urgent need for translated emergency materials and multilingual response system to help bridge this divide. Next slide, please. Youth also discussed the impact of external influences, particularly through social media on their communities. Some described a shift away from traditional collective support systems towards more individualistic behaviors. For example, one of the participants stated, "Our community is heavily influenced by outside sources quite frequently. We went from being a community that always helps each other to grow to becoming a more selfish turn towards gun violence and drug use." So they have this is a very strong statement highlighting about how they were and how they have become. Therefore, while external sources like social media were reported as a source of awareness, social media were also seen as contributors to disconnection and risk, leading people in their communities to adopt values that conflict with their community norms. Next slide, please. Another important theme was the normalization of trauma as a barrier of emergency preparedness. Youth shared that their communities often react to crisis with silence or short-term responses rather than long-term prevention or healing. For example, Somali youth reflected on how gun violence is acknowledged but not discussed in a way that promotes change. Bhutanese Nepali youth noted that people often don't even recognize their experiences as trauma because, as we know, the hardship has been so constant and they are so used to going through trauma. So this mindset prevents communities from seeking help or planning ahead to future risks. Next slide, please. Finally, youth emphasized the stigma around mental health. So they shared that within many refugee communities, mental health is not talked about openly and is often seen as a weakness. Um, Bhutanese Nepali youth in particular spoke about bottling up emotions due to fear of judgment. So this stigma is especially strong among older generations and can stop individuals from reaching out for support even when resources are available. Next slide, please. Youth expressed a strong desire to be seen as active contributors, not just recipient of support. They recommended involving young people in emergency planning and leadership roles, especially through school or community-based organizations. They emphasize starting with informal relation building events such as cultural celebrations, games, or shared meals as a way to build trust and then gradually introduce service opportunities to promote emergency preparedness. Ethiopian youth pointed out that youth are more likely to engage if they feel connected and included first before being asked to take action or to volunteer or assist others in the community. Next slide, please. Next is youth also emphasized the importance of clear, culturally relevant communication. They suggested using trusted messengers to deliver emergency information, such as community elders and spiritual leaders, or creating promotional videos with familiar faces, someone from their community whom they know or can relate to. For example, Bhutanese Nepali youth said that messages shared by spiritual leaders on temple web pages would gain more trust, particularly from older adults. Participants also called for videos and materials to be in native languages and shared across platforms like WhatsApp, YouTube, and in person gatherings. Participants also suggested adding multilingual translators to 911 services to help bridge urgent language gaps. Next slide, please. Finally, youth stressed the need to build on existing cultural and faith-based networks. Mosques, temples, and churches already served as trusted spaces and should be recognized as key partners during crisis. Rather than replacing these traditional systems, youth recommended and highlighted that public health and emergency organizations should work with them. Afghan and Somali youth shared how faith-based programs help them grow and learn and call for similar partnerships that honor their communities' values and strengths. So the takeaway here is clear. So culturally grounded engagement is not optional; it's essential. So this is all from my end about qualitative findings. Now I pass it to Jet to continue the presentation. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much for that presentation, Isha, Dr. Saruna, and Liz. I will go ahead and now go over information dissemination, social media, emergency kits, and best practices. Let's pull up the slides. So for information dissemination, getting critical information out on time can make all the difference, especially during emergencies and crises. Our community health and wellness team led extensive information dissemination efforts to ensure communities had access to life-saving information. These efforts were carefully documented in Apricot under the weekly tally form. You can see that on the screen. These efforts were carefully documented in the Apricot under the weekly tally form. Between May and August, as you can see, our team had 237 contacts and we distributed 30,000 educational materials. The difference between materials distributed and contacts is materials distributed only refers to you sent a flyer or your social media post to the client or to the community member and you did not follow up with them. Whereas a contact is you followed up with them. So maybe after you sent the flyer, the community member responded back and said, hey, what is this about? And you had a brief conversation with them, an interaction with them. And those usually last for 15 minutes or less. And that's why we record them under the weekly tally. And if they lasted longer than 15 minutes, we would count them under the individual family encounter form, which is not on this study. But as you can see, We did a lot of information dissemination from May through August of 2024. Materials were available in 9 languages, including Pashto, Dari, English, French, Swahili, Lingala, Kinyarwanda, Nepali, and Somali. This wasn't just handing out or sending out flyers. Our staff had real conversations, answered questions, and provided culturally relevant multilingual resources. Our approach was intentional, community-led, and rooted in cultural responsiveness. To see the full breakdown, check out the report. Earlier, the title screen, you could scan the QR code to get access to the full report. I suggest on your own time, taking a look at the full report, looking at it, and looking at the exact figures, because as you can see, it says ... So we don't have the full table. It was too large to include, but you will be able to see the breakdown of the countries of origin, total contacts, and everything. So I briefly wanted to just explain where it says country of origin. I know this grant focused on 5 communities. That, again, let me just restate them. That was the Afghan community, the Bhutanese, Nepali, Congolese, Ethiopian, Eritrean, and Somali. You probably see countries that were not on there as the country of origin. For example, Kenya. So the reason why we still did information dissemination to people that are originally from Kenya is because there's a difference between nationality and ethnicity. There's many people that are considered when we look at their ethnicity, Somali, but their nationality they might be from Somalia, they might be from Kenya, they might be from the US, or they might be from somewhere else. So for this grant, we focused on all of the diaspora, not just Somalis or the certain community coming from only Somalia. No, if they came from Kenya, we supported them too. To see, okay, so Appendix 3 is where you can find the full breakdown of this. It should be the last thing on the report. I suggest that you check it out on your own time. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and just go over some social media outreach. So the goal was to have 20 social media posts and 6 educational videos. As you see, we actually went above and beyond. As you can see, the materials were produced in 8 languages or 9 languages: English, Nepali, Amharic, Pashto, Dari, Somali, Lingala, Swahili. We also did Kinyarwanda. And then when it came to the dissemination platforms, we disseminated on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, WhatsApp. And then when it came to the dissemination methods, we created the social media posts that you're going to see shortly. We also sent text messages, we made phone calls, and we also did in-person outreach. So if somebody showed up to our office, we talked about when we were doing this research in 2024, we had some extreme heat days. So there was a lot of times where we were just even doing an outreach event and we had to share information about extreme heat and how to stay cool when it comes to extreme heat. So the community health and wellness team led content creation focusing on trauma, emergency, and crisis preparedness. We relied on our staff, each representing one of the 5 refugee communities highlighted in the study. Again, that was the Afghan, Bhutanese, Nepali, Congolese, Ethiopian, Eritrean, and Somali, to ensure the content was culturally relevant and community informed. The advancement team managed posting and distribution across all platforms. When we originally planned to create 6 videos and 20 posts, but ultimately we delivered 8 videos and 21 posts. Most of the information was sourced from ready.gov to ensure accuracy. Content was translated into 8 to 9 languages to reach a more diverse audience. For some communities, we needed to translate into more than 1 language to meet the need of the community. So for example, the Afghan community, we needed to translate to Pashto and Dari. Some community members only speak Pashto, some community members only speak Dari. So to make sure that we reached the full community, we translated it into both languages. And for the Congolese community, we did the same thing where we translated it into Swahili, Lingala, and also French. As you mentioned earlier, dissemination included Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, as well as text messages, phone calls, and in-person outreach. A total of 68 posts were shared across ETS's social media platforms. The content reached 3,669 people, generated 1,186 impressions, and received 69 direct engagements. Facebook had the widest reach, as you can see from the table. LinkedIn generated the most impressions, and Instagram had the highest engagement rates. Beyond the numbers, we built connection, trust, and accessibility across communities by relying on our diverse team and being culturally and linguistically appropriate. So now we will go over some of the social media posts. So these ones are just images. I will just go ahead and just point some of them out. The first one is basically talking about the siren system in Franklin County. We noticed during this grant that a lot of our clients didn't even know what was going on. Why every Wednesday at noon am I hearing this sound? So we did a educational post on that, like, hey, if you hear this, it's a test, right? A lot of our community members come from war-torn areas. So sometimes just hearing this siren, we have to tell them, content warning, right? Because it could bring them back to trauma that they experienced back home. Next was the evacuation plan. As you can see, each of our posts, initially what we decided to do was after we made the English post, we translated it into multiple languages, and then we would post them all the languages all at once on our Facebook pages. That got a little bit too clustered, so we decided to add a QR code. And if you scan the QR code on some of these flyers, it will take you to the public view link for the translated material. So for the evacuation plan, we told people to get prepared today, assess your needs, make a plan, engage your support network. We had how to be safe during a tornado. We talked about overdose emergencies. We talked about heat advisory. Earlier I mentioned how we had a few extreme heat warnings when we were doing the grant. So here's one of them. From Monday, June 17th, 12 p.m. Eastern Determinate Time to Friday, June 21st, 8 p.m. Eastern Determinate Time, there's a heat warning, heat advisory. So we had some tips on there. So what is it? Where to go, what are the impacts, and what to do. And then we talked about fire safety. We talked about more severe weather. We talked about floods. Next slide. We talked about cybersecurity. A lot of our communities don't know how to stay safe online. We talked about staying safe online, always keeping everything updated. Don't share your passwords or PINs. Always use strong passwords, and don't share personal information online. As you can see, we included the link of the source on each one. So for more information, visit ready.gov cybersecurity. Ready.gov was our best friend during this grant. Everything we got, we sourced from them. You see another one, extreme heat warnings are serious. We just wanted to say, hey, take this seriously. And then we had another high heat advisory. We talked about what to do during power outages. And then we talked about, hey, do you know about fire safety? So I think this was actually a video, but it was more writing, and then he had the languages also. So I decided to upload it here. But this video, when I spoke to the community navigator, they let me know that it was because sometimes some of our community members will take the battery out of it, right? So we had to make sure, hey, this is a smoke detector, it's very important. Don't take the batteries out, even because, sometimes you're cooking and it goes off and, might annoy you. Don't worry about that. It's very important that you have this on, you test it. Do not take the batteries out. Do not remove the smoke detector. We had to make sure that we educated our communities. And then when it came to the fire escape plan, we asked our communities, do you have a fire escape plan? Are you prepared? Are you ready? And then we said, remember, every second counts in the event of a fire. Escape plans help to get out of your home quickly. Next slide. So here's just more. I told you we did 21 posts and 8 videos. So here's the remaining 21 posts. So we talked about conservation tips, droughts. So there's this tool. I think you can also access it through ready.gov, but you just put in your zip code and it will tell you all of the emergencies that happen there. So that's what we did. We didn't want to do just random emergencies that, happen somewhere else that don't happen in Ohio. We looked at Ohio. We looked at the emergencies that happen in Ohio, and we made social media posts based off of them. So droughts happen in Ohio. We talked about conservation tips. Never pour water down the drain if it can be used for another purpose. So just recycling your water. For instance, use it to water your indoor plants or garden. And then we talked about preventing domestic violence for certain communities. We saw that this was an issue. And so we, it was an emergency in that community. So we decided to make a social media post on it. We talked more about flood emergencies. We talked about flammable solids. We talked about more tornadoes, household chemicals. A lot of our communities have all of these chemicals, in their home, but are they keeping it away from children and all of these good things? And then we also talked about making sure you and your family are safe. So talking about different emergencies and getting prepared, like, hey, not just having a fire escape plan, but hey, what happens if we have an earthquake or a tornado or something like that, active shooter, anything that might happen, we talked about. So we can go to the videos now. I think we have some time to actually play these videos so we can get them played.
Hello everyone, today we're going to be looking at how to get ready for a pandemic. A pandemic occurs when a disease spreads across multiple countries and affects many people. Viruses can spread easily among people, typically causing a pandemic. New viruses can emerge unexpectedly and spread rapidly worldwide. It is challenging to predict when or where the next pandemic will originate. Pandemics spread through various routes: person-to-person transmission, contact with contaminated surfaces from infected individuals without symptoms, and understanding these routes will help prevention. If a pandemic is declared, it is important to take preventive measures such as washing your hands frequently with soap and water, maintaining a 6-foot distance from others, wearing a mask in public, cleaning and disinfecting surfaces regularly. Preparing for a pandemic involves several key steps: educating yourself on how the disease spreads to better protect your family and your community, and anticipating a potential closures of school, workplaces, and community centers, and also gathering essential supplies such as non-perishable foods, medication, and cleaning products. If you believe you've been exposed to a disease during a pandemic, take immediate action. Contact your healthcare provider for guidance and follow their quarantine instructions. Monitor your symptoms closely, and if you're experiencing a medical emergency, call 911. If possible, please wear a mask and isolate yourself until help arrives to prevent further spread of the disease. And finally, know that your safety is in your hands. Stay safe.
Public spaces are important for our communities, providing places to gather, play, and relax. But emergencies can happen anytime, anywhere. Be ready, know the evacuation routes, locate emergency exits, and identify safe spots. Get trained on basic first aid and know how to contact emergency services.
को सजगता अत्याधिक गर्मीको लागि तयार हुनुहोस् वृद्ध वृद्धा बालबालिका बिरामी वा अधिक तौल भएका व्यक्तिहरू बढी जोखिममा हुन्छन् न्यानो दिनमा अथवा गरम दिनमा गाडीभित्र बालबच्चा वयस्क वा जनावरलाई एक्लै नछोड्नुहोस् थप जानकारीको लागि तलको लिङ्क पछ्याउनुहोस्
Did you know? Let's talk about fire and dryer safety. Cleaning out your dryer and making it leak free weekly is a good tip to prevent a fire hazard. Here is how you need to clean your laundry dryer machine in order to avoid a fire hazard. Thank you.
Did you know about traumatic events and disasters? Here are some tips. Prioritize your well being. Connect with friends and family. Reduce your news intake. Ensure you get quality sleep. Set and follow a routine. Home safety. Did you know about home safety? When an injury occurs at home, it is crucial to know how to respond. Ensure safety, prevent further harm, and control the injured person's pain. Building your own kit. First, an emergency blanket, a breathing barrier with a one-way valve, an instant cold compress, two pairs of large-sized non-latex gloves, one 3-inch gauze roller bandage,
Thank you so much for playing those social media videos. I hope everybody was able to learn a few things from them. I know our clients were definitely able to learn a lot of good things from them. As you can see, the social media videos, we put a lot of work into them. We designed them thinking about the communities. We translated it into multiple languages. And as you saw, at one point, we even played a video that was not in English, but it was just in Nepali. So sometimes we just made a video in just one language so that the community could understand it. And we didn't have the translated language on with the video because some of our communities, depending on their literacy levels, they cannot read or write in their own language as well. So now I'll go over the emergency magnets or the emergency kits. There's also emergency magnets. So if you just go, I'll get started with the pictures. So these were our kits. If you can see that the emergency kits had a bunch of items. We partnered with a different organization to do them. We didn't do them ourselves, but we did add some extra things on them. So the top right here in the boxes are the emergency magnets. You can see that those magnets had basically contact lists. So basically, if you have a fire, who do you contact? If you have a mental health emergency, who do you contact? If you need a what's it called? They also talked about non-emergent. We also included the non-emergency line. I've had to use that in the past. I don't know how many of our communities are aware of it, that if you don't have an emergency, but you still want to contact the police, 911 is not the best one, but there's an emergency line that you can contact. So we had all of those contact information on those magnets. We translated it into the multiple languages, and we included them inside the kits, or we handed them to the community leaders to pass out to the community members. We built 50 kits per community. So each kit is that bag that you see that says emergency kits. It had a few items. I don't want to list them all out right now, but you can see an emergency radio. You can see a carbon monoxide and smoke detector. There's a flashlight. There's a stress ball. There's the COVID tests. There is a fire blanket. There's a first aid kit. There's an emergency whistle. And then we also had some 988 resources that we, around the same time as this grant, we did reverse translation on some 988 materials, and we decided to include that with the kits as well. There's also some body wipes. There's some hygienic like cleaning for like toothbrushes and stuff. And then we also, I don't think you can see it in this picture, but you can sort of see it here. But right there is actually instructions. So we just didn't give them all of these items without like, oh, how do I use this? Maybe they've never used a fire blanket before. So what we did was we made instructions for each of the products, and we translated into multiple languages, and that was also included in all the emergency kits. Next slide. So that was just a little bit on the emergency kits. Now I will talk about the community contacts. So this was the collaborative platform for crisis response and referrals. We decided to do this by basically partnering with the community-based organizations, getting contacts from them, and then we're the contacts with the emergency professionals, and then at the end, we're able to connect them if needed. In times of crisis, we know how important it is to have trusted, organized connections in place. That's why we created a collaborative platform for crisis response and referrals, where we gathered contact information from 81 community members across 5 refugee communities. Oh, it seems like there's buffering online, so I apologize if there's any buffering. But that's why we created a collaborative platform of crisis response and referrals, where we gathered contact information from 81 community leaders across 5 refugee communities, including the Afghan, Bhutanese, Nepali, Congolese, Ethiopian, Eritrean, and Somali. These leaders are deeply rooted in their communities and serve as essential bridges to support and for resources. To protect everyone's privacy, we're only publicly listing one main contact person per community. So for the Afghan community, the best contact is Mr. Irfan Ali. For the Bhutanese Nepali community, it's Mr. Durga Timsina. For the Congolese community, it's Emmanuel Obotela. For the Ethiopian Eritrean community, it's Father Dr. Yared. And then for the Somali community, it's Dr. Dorothy Hassan. If you would like to get in contact with any of these names that I listed out, please reach out to me. My contact information is provided right there. My email is jetjama@ethioTSS.org. And then as the lead of this platform, I personally helped redirect inquiries to the appropriate community leaders. So you can feel free to reach out to me directly. If we could go back to that slide with the context. Yeah. So feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'll go ahead and get you in contact with everybody on that list. So now we can go over the best practices. So as we reflect on what we learned today from this work, several key policy implications and strategy recommendations have become clear. First, we need to prioritize the development of culturally and linguistically appropriate materials in languages like Dari, Pashto, Nepali, French, Lingala, Amharic, Somali, and others. Accessibility starts with language. Just as important, we must use visuals for low literacy friendly formats, so that this information is understandable to everyone, regardless of their reading level. We also recommend providing multilingual interpretation services during emergency preparedness trainings and public meetings. Without interpretation, many community members are left out of critical conversations. Alongside that, we need to host more community workshops and knowledge sharing events that encourage dialogue, raise awareness, and foster collective readiness. Another major lesson is the need to raise awareness about existing resources. This includes hotlines, crisis centers, and referral networks are often underutilized simply because people don't know they exist. That's an easy gap we can fix with better communication and better marketing and better outreach. Youth engagement also emerged as a powerful tool. We should involve young people in planning, training, and peer education efforts. Existing youth associations and student groups are ready to lead. They just need our support. Let's not forget the role of trusted community leaders, faith-based institutions, and cultural organizations. They're essential partners to delivering information and building trust. And then finally, we need stronger collaboration between community support systems and formal emergency services. Cultural and religious networks are often the first to respond in a crisis. Recognizing and resourcing them as part of the formal response system will strengthen our collective safety and resilience. So now I will pass it on to Diana to go over the resources that ETSS has to offer. And Diana will be joining us virtually.
Hello, everyone. My name is Diana Russell, and I'm the Director of Institutional Advancement here at ETSS Tehuajiro Social Services. Let me take a moment to share a bit about who we are and the range of services we offer at ETSS. Our work spans across 4 core areas, each designed to empower the community we serve through culturally grounded and community-led programming. First, in our adult services, we focus on helping build stability and resilience. That includes access to community health and wellness, engagement works, education, employment empowerment, family care, and Ohio Can. These programs are all about helping folks become self-sufficient while staying connected to the support and resources they need, whether it's finding a job, accessing healthcare, or getting connected to family services. We walk alongside people through that journey. Next, we have youth services. We run a variety of comprehensive programs for kids and teens aged 5 to 18. This includes the after-school programs, summer youth enrichment, Reach Higher healthy transition, AMP, and family engagement. We want young people to feel empowered, supported, and seen. These programs focus on both academic and emotional growth, creating safe spaces for young people to thrive. Then there's resettlement. This is a key pillar of our work. We support refugees and immigrants as they adjust to life in the US, helping with housing, employment, cultural orientation, healthcare access. We know that navigating these systems can be overwhelming, especially in a new country. So we offer case management, connect people to community partnerships, and provide services tailored to help them integrate and feel here at home. Finally, we have our Grassroots Empowerment Initiative. This is about capacity building and sustainability. We support grassroots and community-led organizations through training, board development, grant writing support. This helps them grow stronger, lead more effective, and sustain the work that they do. These local leaders are doing incredible work, and we see it as our role to help remove barriers and boost their impacts. Now I want to highlight something else that ties in directly with this grant and our broader efforts in behavioral health. Around the same time this project began, ETSS was contacted by the Adam H. Board of Franklin County to support efforts in reverse translating the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, especially in our multilingual communities. We know how important it was, so we pulled together our community health and wellness team and worked directly with Adam H. to translate 998 resource materials into multiple languages, including Amharic, Nepali, Somali, and more. These translations make it easier for community members to recognize signs of crisis and know where to turn for help in language that they understand. What you're seeing here on the screen are just a few examples of the translated 998 flyers. Each one includes warning signs and symptoms and what the 988 lifeline can help with. Things like suicidal thoughts, alcohol or drug use, depression or trauma. This information is now being shared across communities that didn't previously have access to in their languages. So if you haven't, I encourage you to download the resources using the links at the bottom of the slide. You'll find them on the Adam H. Board of Franklin County site at ready.gov. Both are a fantastic source for emergency preparedness information. Whether you work directly with community members or supporting organizations that do, these resources can save lives. And the more we can share them, the stronger and safer our communities become. Thank you.
Okay, so if you have any questions after today's webinar, please feel free to reach out to my colleague Liz. Her email is listed on the slide. You can also leave your questions in the YouTube comments. We are planning to create a frequently asked question answer page, and we will do our best to answer your questions there. Or maybe we could also invite some community members to respond to your comment and questions in future webinar. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our first webinar. Thank you everybody so much for being here today. We hope you found the webinar helpful and informative.